Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Ulrich again, and I did Chapter 6, Reviewing the Literature. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So a little bit of what to expect. The chapter had a little bit of a review of the purpose of what a literature review is for, kind of some organizational skills that we can use while we're here, some stuff about writing notes on what we've read, the length of the content and what we should be looking for, and then stuff for writing, and then synthesizing and analyzing literature. This is just kind of a good rundown of what all to expect when you're doing your literature review and just goes over all of it. So let's jump into the review. So when talking about the literature review, I know most of us have probably done a little bit of one before when writing, but basically you want to make sure that you know what you're looking for and to start looking through the literature. So this includes finding primary sources. The chapter specifically outlined kind of making sure that your sources are primary. So if you find an article that you think is interesting, do your best to find that original source or to cite it as a secondary source. You just want to make sure that you're getting the information from the source itself instead of how someone interpreted what the source was saying, because that's how errors can happen. It included things about, making sure that you don't take too much from popular press. And this can be things like magazines and news articles and things like that, because they can misconstrue what the findings were saying, kind of the same as the primary sources. And then making sure that you make a strategy. If you know what you need to search for, trying to help, nail down how you're going to get there is going to help you in the long run because you know what you need to be doing. And just making sure that you have a more efficient run through of what you're trying to find. In terms of when you start beginning your search, once you find your topic, finding those key words and the terms are really going to help you, because then you'll know what to search for when you're looking through the literature. It's also going to help you when you use some of those search engines and things to help type in some keywords you're looking for and use like Booleans such as and, or, except, or not, when things are together, just to make sure that you're on the same page with what you're searching for. And then you'll want to make sure you specify what search engines are you looking for. Are you going to use more general ones like Google Scholar, which can be great for finding sources to begin with, but may also have less reputable sources that they're drawing from. So it's just kind of finding what balance you want to use for it. And you also want to make sure that you're using a range of journals that you're searching through. Don't just search from psych articles. There's so many different search engines. So make sure that you're trying to find it. And there can be things you don't think about that impact what you're searching for. This can be the number of years that are, in the range that you're searching for. If you're looking for the last 10, you might miss some articles. If you're looking too far in the past, you might miss newer things that come out. The types of journals that are housed within a database might also impact it, and just how long the database has been running or collecting articles from it. In terms of authors, if you find a number of authors have published on this topic, it might be a good idea to go and search for that author and find what else they've published. They might have done something newer that you're not looking for. And just maybe asking your professors, if you already have a chair, or if you have an individual who works in this field that you know personally, you might go and ask them, hey, do you know someone I could start with to help me get the ball rolling? And in terms of sources, you'll want to check the reference sections. It might be a great idea, if you find a really good article that's close to your topic, to look at those reference sections, the bibliographies, or if there's some kind of citation index that has a ton of resources for you from where they drew their information, to get that background information and kind of start your search. And don't just limit it to our discipline. I know psychology is kind of our field, but there might be good information in the nursing field or in a different field from ours that shouldn't be ignored just because we're in this field. So just kind of check it over and make sure that you have a good source base in mind. In terms of organization, when you're writing, you're going to want to remember to keep track of your citations. And early information, the more you can get, the better. Because the more you can get, the less you're going to have to look up later, and the less you're going to have to try to remember. And the author specifically mentioned, if you have a great citation or a quote from someone that you find early, to cite where you got it from in the page number, even in maybe some notes that you write, so that you don't have to dig for it later. Using some software like EndNote or Zotero can be great for housing those citations that you've got, so you don't have to dig back through articles to try to find them. Try to set up some type of folder method and keeping it organized, such as, by a subject, by things that you've opened and you think were interesting that you added but you haven't reviewed yet, or by relevant sources that you want to do, even if there's a future project, just to keep them together and have some kind of a system for that. Excuse me. Make notes and or comments for your later self. The authors kind of recommend a little bit of both, and so the notes can be while you're going through critiquing the article, things you're finding as you're reading it, and the comments for yourself later can be things that you personally are thinking, like, wow, this is really close to this other article I read, I should come back and link these two, or maybe this is completely contrary to something I read and I need to pay attention to that and maybe address it later. And think about how are you going to organize them, by author, by journal, by year, just things like that. Also think about any unanswered questions. Are there any things that the authors are noting for you that maybe you didn't think of, or maybe they have skipped over a topic a couple of times because there's not as much research? Maybe that's your opportunity to do the research in that vein. And consider articles that are not maybe your main topic, or that might be a little bit of a tangent. If there are things you need to skip and not read the whole way through, know that, and you don't have to spend as much time on those things. The authors also, as it mentions, kind of consider skimming once and then going back over and rereading something to help really get the information in your brain. And that way you can kind of save yourself some time for later down the line when you're like, hey, I just skimmed over this. I think it would be good to place in my official dissertation. I can come back to that article and re-look it over. Let me see, that might be all for this one. Once you get to kind of that writing step, it specifically mentions to remember who your audience is. That it'll be your dissertation and your chair and the board that you have going for you, but you want to be able to walk them through it, and that needs to be a logical sequence of events. And when writing, by the end of this literature review, the question that you're trying to address and the measures that you're going to be using should kind of be obvious to them. They should be able to kind of figure it out for themselves and it be something that makes sense to them. Think about creating yourself an outline. This might save you time down the line, even though many people don't like to do it. It can give you kind of small set point goals so that you don't have to do everything at once. It can kind of give you a streamlined version of what you need to get done so that you can focus on small tasks instead of devoting hours and hours and not maybe feeling like you've gotten anywhere. And one of the biggest things is just to start writing. Writer's block is real and it'll impact you when you're doing this big kind of overarching task. So just don't take it too much at a time. Take little steps, and just, if you're having a big struggle on starting with something, switch to a different topic and see if you can complete that one instead, or if it gives you an idea to go back, such as the introduction section. Many of us might skip that to begin with and come back to it later because it just makes more sense that way. And set yourself small goals and reward yourself when you've done those small goals. You don't have to write 30 pages in a night. Maybe it's every week I'm going to try to write 5 pages, and I'll try to break it down to, a page some nights, or if I'm really not feeling it, maybe I can get half a page, maybe I can just get a few sentences. If I can just do a little bit of something and then reward myself, I did a good job, I've earned whatever reward I might be able to give myself, and just kind of committing to that goal we've made. And then in terms of synthesizing and analyzing, one of the big critiques that the authors from this chapter kind of mentioned were that younger students might have a tendency to describe the data more than they try to critique the data, and that this can cause problems. So they said, try to make sure that you're checking in on yourself of, am I describing this too much when I should be evaluating it? Am I just trusting the authors when I should be asking more questions? And when you start analyzing it, there's some patterns that there's some methods that they've engaged for us to use, such as, is there a pattern that I can find? Are there consistent patterns throughout this that I need to look at? Yes or no? Are there possible explanations that I can think of for why they might have found whatever the result was, or why this might have happened? Using professionalism, specifically the authors mentioned, this is not, critiquing an article is not the same as attacking another person or an author for missing something they didn't see. This is the time to kind of think critically about the literature, but not attack an author for missing something. And then when you're providing kind of the end of the literature review, it might be a good idea to add the subsection of a summary and a critique to kind of go over what we've learned so far, and to critique it one more time and draw links to things so that people really get to understand it. And by the end of this, your readers, including your chair, should understand the methods and the purpose of your study. Why are we doing this, and what are we doing it for? Kind of like we mentioned earlier. If there's any additional subsections that your college needs, we can put it here. I don't know of many that Brenau requires, but they might, in your chair or your board might ask you to add additional subsections, and just be open to that. And then lastly, a lot of revision and rewriting and rereading of this subject matter might be required for you to stay on topic. And it's important for you to remember that this should never be perfect. It's a process, and you need to be open to feedback if they're providing it to you. So just make sure that you're coming from a place where I'm not being attacked, I'm just being provided a way to succeed in this field. And then there's great examples throughout this as it shows. So on page 107 to 109, there's a guide for evaluating empirical studies, and this just goes through a lot of the things that kind of you can check for to make sure you're doing it correctly. Page 111 to 113 has a great coding sheet so that you can kind of get a better idea of how to complete that on your own and maybe make an online document for it. Page 116 has an outline example for a way that you could synthesize your information and start making a guide for yourself. Page 124 and 125 have an example annotated bibliography if you're not sure how best to do that, or a good way to kind of set up the system. And then the very last page, 131, has a to-do list for kind of the total experience of the literature review if you have any kind of questions to check over. And then thank you all so much for being here. I know this was short, sweet, to the point, but I hope this can be helpful, and best of luck.